the list. And the chairperson of the ANC has indicated that that issue will be dealt with a bit later on. Whether the delegates who are voting should be allowed with a list of the 80 names of NEC nominees which they want to vote for. And I've already made my position clear on this one. I say that it would be a bit impossible to remember 80 people, and whether you support those people would be a bit difficult. And I was thinking now that even at the office, I was trying to think, who do I know? Do I know 80 people who I can say their name and their surname and write them down, and there won't be any spelling mistake? Because the risk there is that it could be a spoiled ballot. Yes, indeed. Well, I raised this issue I said, I don't know the team you support, but I'm aware that you know all the players. If you're a delegate, a responsible delegate, who is representing a branch, who wants a leadership that must make a change in South Africa, he wouldn't struggle to identify people that were discussed at conference, at a branch level. But I would expect a situation where a list will then be provided to all the voting delegates, and then they'll be given sufficient time to look at the names that were actually discussed at a branch level. But also, we've got different calibers of people that are attending. Some might not be able to recall the names, but if you look at the generation here at conference, it's people that are still in a very active, who might be in a very, very good state of mind, that they might still be able to do that. But in the main, it wasn't necessary to have such a long discussion over these simple issues.
But it's very telling, Lebohang, because if you are expected to nominate and elect leadership, surely you would have done due diligence. Otherwise, what does that mean? That you come here just to be voting cattle?
To be unprepared. I mean, the whole idea, I mean, it links to what Levy was saying as well, that you'd expect that if you've been given a mandate from your branch, your province, etc., there have been several deliberations. Conference doesn't start here, right? So conference has been for the past, in fact, conference starts at the end of the previous conference, effectively. So we would expect that certainly there have been deliberations, and that not only that, there have been a qualitative sense of what the slate, the totality of the slate should look like. What are the criteria of leaders that we're looking for? Why are we even selecting these particular people? And, you know, of course, I mean, I think it is asking a bit much to remember 80 names in detail, but I do think that in terms of a sense of there should not be anybody who's completely unfamiliar to anybody who comes here. And I don't think we need to be having these kind of very granular discussions.
But we are. So I mean, it speaks to cadreship, it speaks to the quality of engagement, it speaks to the quality of the branches as well. It speaks to the sort of, I mean, when we were growing up, I won't say when, but a long while ago, there were political schools, there were even Saturday schools. You had your reading list, you had to read Cabral, you had to read certain people, you had to read Nkrumah, you had to, you know, the things that you needed to know, you had to read a bit of Marx, you needed to know a few things, you also needed to understand party political procedure. And this is like most of the Liberation Party traditions. Now, this also indicates that there's been a lapse in the transition from how things were done a long time ago, 23 years ago, to the way that the party is functioning now. And we have to understand that this is an institution and it has to function in a particular way. Its members need to understand its functionality and are also part of optimizing that functionality. So if members here don't come well prepared, prepped, read up, aware, having gone online, and thanks to you know, Wikipedia, Google, internet cafes, it's easy to access this information. So if they don't come prepped, this is the quality of engagement that unfortunately we are subjected to at a national level, live on television.
But I wonder, doesn't it then signal a space for improvement for the ANC's functions? Because if this is what the ANC was doing back in 1997, sure, surely technology has improved and there has been some sort of modernization that should have kicked in terms of how do you vote and how do you nominate and so forth. Another issue that will probably come up now is had there been a nomination from the floor and somebody stood up and said that I am standing, the expectation is that the Electoral Commission staff members will then have to count up to 1,000 something members. And at which point, don't you know whether one delegate has changed the tag and given their voting tag to Sakina?
Somebody
because there's definitely room for improvement.
There's lots of room for improvement.
I almost felt a lightning bolt jolt through me as Aldrin was saying that, because I think, frankly, it's just embarrassing for the ANC. This should not be playing out at conference, not this level of disagreement, I don't think. No. There are more serious issues, substantive issues that conference should be spending time on engaging, not, we want to have a list to go into a voting booth because we can't remember who the 80 delegates are that we're supposed to vote for.
We haven't even heard the mention of a policy issue so far.
No, none whatsoever. So Khalifa Motlanthe must make inroads there with that school. The building is there. Yes. He must go and teach.
Actually, we were speaking to one analyst, Theo Venter, who said that the school is there, the building is there, but the function of the school is non-existent.
Then you will recall that one of the achievements of the Gwedemantashe's SGs has been that he was able to raise the number of membership in the ANC up to 1 million. Now, having celebrated that, how then do you translate this membership into quality membership or active members of the ANC? Because obviously this has an impact on the logistical arrangements for conference like this one, for delegations and so on and so on. Because you have got active members and members of the ANC who are not active. And that will also compromise quality. But then what else can you do? Because the ANC says we are a mass-based organization, and obviously that will be confirmed by the numbers that they have in terms of membership.
But beyond just that, so if you have a membership that isn't even familiar with basic rules and processes and regulations, how do you then formulate strategy and tactics? Or is this something that is then deferred to a certain grouping within the party and everybody else just ratifies?
So you're touching on something that's really important, which is the role and the agency of political cadreship. What is the function? Because surely what the branch level and what broad cadreship should reflect are the aspirations and the needs and the response to those aspirations, respond to the issues on the ground, the issues that are really besetting people in communities across this country. Now, if they are not able to articulate or they have offloaded, ceded that power and that agency to a small group, a smaller cartel of a brain trust, that becomes very problematic, because it means then, even though we're told the rhetoric that the power is in the branches, it really isn't.
Yeah. And how often do those branch meetings sit? How often do the branch meetings, the guys from the branches actually sit down and discuss issues of policies? Because even if you look at the past BGMs that took place, the most contentious issue was leadership, more than the policy proposals.
What is preoccupying the mind of a delegate now? For me, is that most delegates are actually bogged down into who then becomes the winner. And that is just one component of conference.
Exactly.
What conferences should do is to focus on the policies that were discussed in June, and then ensure that they find each other, have consensus, and then make sure that these policies are then being implemented.
And that's the reason why, for instance, you had policy proposals in terms of amending the constitution. And they couldn't even get to that. It was decided that all constitutional amendments will now be deferred to the next conference.
Yeah, another 5 years.
So that is quite telling. But of course, some of those policy amendments were meant to actually improve, the functioning of the organization. And you're saying that that is less important than you actually deciding on who the next president will be.
And the quality of the organization that they're going to land into.
That is the unfortunate part. I thought, if you remember, in his closing remarks in Mangaung, President Zuma emphasized the establishment of the political school.
Yeah.
I expected this conference to have a report on the progress made in relation to the political school. I know you're talking about the building that is in existence elsewhere. Maybe we should look at registration and progress. And I doubt if there is any progress.
Let alone the curriculum.
Indeed, because we need to know what is it that the ANC is teaching. There are new members that are coming into the party, and unfortunately that doesn't seem to be occupying a center stage, and that is a worrying factor, especially for the ruling party. And also, if you look at the candidates, there's another factor that is quite missing for me, is the generation.
Yeah.
The ANC seem to be mainly focusing on the older generation, and you're not getting younger people coming into the system. Maybe they are being demoralized to get involved now because they know they won't get leadership positions.
Jesse Duarte had an interview with one of our colleagues just this past week, and they were speaking about this issue around the branches and the strength of the branches and the quality of cadreship and so forth. And she said that it was actually a problem that there are more young people that are coming into the structures, and that's the reason why the ANC is facing these difficulties that it's currently facing. Which for me was a bit strange for her to say that.
How odd. I mean, I think that one of the things that's the strength of any organization, institution, grouping is its ability to harness an intergenerational blend of, and intergenerational, by the way, not only in terms of age, intergenerational men, women, differently abled people, etc., etc. So different generations of skills, expertise, and world visions, because this is surely what brings the dynamism that's needed to propel any movement forward. If a bunch of 50-year-olds or a bunch of 20-year-olds or a bunch of 80-year-olds are going to sit and deliberate together, there'll be a level of self-referring, because the world vision is slightly different, is the same. But when you have a multiplicity of characters and characteristics, then you also have the opportunity to open up to multilinear pathways to success, to solutions, to ideas, and to a future vision. So I think that's very odd, and it's also counterlinear given the age of most Africans right now. That's the other thing. I mean, it just goes against our demographic situation on the continent.
I'm actually looking at and trying to find out the exact age of Zingisa Losi, and as it stands at the moment, she's probably the youngest nominee out of all the nominees that have been mentioned. Ronald Lamula earlier on spoke about we need more young people to come through. There must be space. There should be the last time that we have pensioners who are being nominated to become the president of the ANC. Let's just quickly have a relook at the numbers that came through in terms of the nominations. We saw earlier on that Cyril Ramaphosa, of course, as well as Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma, the only two contenders as it stands at the moment, 1,469 nominations. We must indicate that these are nominations from the branches, not nominations from the individuals. So things might just change. Let's just take a listen to those numbers.
Good afternoon, comrades. As indicated, what you are about to be presented with is the consolidation of the officials as nominated by the branches, and I will go position by position, outlining the nominees, that is the candidates nominated per position, and indicate those that would have accepted and those that would have declined. And then we will then get straight into further nominations from the floor. And at this point, I'd like to request the agency staff to take their positions should there be any further nominations from the floor for the officials. Agency staff, please spread yourselves accordingly. And if I may plead with delegates, comrades, that everyone remain seated as we do the counting of seconders during the further nominations from the floor process to allow the agency staff to do their counting properly. Comrade, without any waste of time, in terms of the credentials that have been adopted by conference, we know that a total of 4776 delegates are present here, voting delegates. And in terms of the floor nomination process, we require the 25%, which I will outline as we get into the process. Every nomination coming from the floor will be required to meet the constitutional requirement of the 25% threshold. And here we are. The 25% of the 4776 is 1592, so that we know upfront what our figures are. My apologies, 1194 is the total for the 25%. Without any further waste of time, the following are the candidates for the position of president as nominated by branches. For the position of president, we've got Comrade Cyril Ramaphosa, who has, comrades, please give me time and then we can do the rest afterwards. Comrade Cyril Ramaphosa, nominated by 1,469 branches across 6 provinces, and Comrade has accepted nomination. And then we have Comrade Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, who has been nominated by 1,094 branches across 6 provinces, and Comrade has also accepted nominations. As things stand, comrades, we have 2 candidates for the position of president, Comrade Cyril Ramaphosa and Comrade Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. Do we have any further nominations from the floor for the position of president? Any further nominations? I don't see any hands. That's it, comrades. For the position of president, we have our 2 candidates. We will revisit the final lists for the officials as we end the process. Thank you, comrades. We move on. The next position is that of deputy president. For this portfolio, we've got the following candidates. Comrade David Mabuza, nominated by 1128 branches across 6 provinces, and Comrade has accepted nomination. Our second candidate is Comrade Zweli Mkhize, nominated by 193 branches across a province, 1 province, and Comrade has accepted nomination. We then have Comrade Lindiwe Sisulu, nominated by 619 branches across 4 provinces, and Comrade has accepted nomination. And the last province had nominated Comrade Nalendi Pando, and she has declined nomination. So our candidates, comrades, for the position of deputy president are Comrade David Mabuza, Comrade Zweli Mkhize, and Comrade Lindiwe Sisulu. Do we have any further nominations from the floor for the position of deputy president? None. We move on, comrades. The next position is that of national chairperson. For this position, we have Comrade Gwede Mandashe, nominated by 1,499 branches across 7 provinces, and Comrade has accepted nomination, followed by Comrade Nati Mtetwa, nominated by 807 branches across 5 provinces, and Comrade has accepted. Do we have any further nominations from the floor for the position of National Chair? No hands. Next position is that of Secretary General. We have Comrade Senzo Mkhunu, nominated by 1,479 branches across 7 provinces. We then also have Comrade Ace Makashule, nominated by 930 branches across 5 provinces, and both candidates have accepted nomination. Are there any further nominations from the floor for the position of Secretary General? None.
Well, that was a recap there of some of the nominations by the Director of the Elections Agency, Buntle Mpakanyane there. So just looking at that, very interesting. Firstly, let's start off with the nomination for President, Ronesh. Ronesh Doraj, our research person here at the SABC, joins us now. And Ronesh, firstly, one of the things that was quite clear there, even before we look at the president, is the number of votes that were cast for the individual candidates. And especially looking at the Nkosazana slate and how only 2 people managed to get above the 1,000 vote threshold there, which is Nkosazana and in the position of deputy as well, Didi Mabuza. So let's talk about that, but let's start with the president.
Yeah, very interesting numbers, Sakina. You know, obviously you're looking at the presidential race, that's the big one. If you look at the number of branch nominations that actually emanated from the provincial general councils, Cyril Ramaphosa leading the pack with 1,469 branch nominations from 6 provinces. He obviously accepted. Dr. Dlamini Zuma with 1,094 from 6 provinces. And very interesting, the difference between the 2 numbers is 375. Again, like Eldrin said, remember, these are branch nominations, not necessarily equating to 1 delegate. So some of the branches might be a little bigger, like we know in eThekwini is the biggest region in the country of the ANC. So some branches there will naturally have more delegates assigned to them. Then the deputy president's posts, for me it's a foregone conclusion. If you look at the nominations from the branches, we've got the current Mpumalanga chairperson and the premier, David Mabuza, 1,128. He's been nominated by 6 provinces. Then his closest rival is Lindiwe Sisulu with 619. Then we saw lots of gasps in plenary when Zweli Mkhize stood up and said, "I decline very kindly. Thank you very much for that nomination." But he was nominated by 193 branches. So if you look at the difference between 1,128 and 619, I somehow can foresee this is a foregone conclusion that David Mabuza will be the deputy president of the ANC. Then the other nominations, the chairperson, Gwede Mantashe, very big difference between him and Nathi Mthethwa. Gwede Mantashe, drawing support of 1,499 branches from 7 provinces. That's a massive, massive majority, 7 of the 9 provinces. Then Nathi Mthethwa, 5 provinces endorsed him with 807 nominations. Then here's another very interesting one for me. The former chair of KZN, Senzo Mkhunu, he was also the premier there. Another majority judgment, another majority endorsement, 7 provinces endorsing him with 1,479 branch nominations. His closest rival, the disputed chairperson of the Free State, Ace Makashule, with 900
action in the province.
So Ace Makashule with 930 nominations. But if you look at the provincial endorsements compared to Senzo, Senzo has 7 provinces on his side, while Ace has 5 provinces. Then the DSG, the Deputy Secretary General, this again I also think it's a foregone conclusion. Jessie Duarte, who is the incumbent, she managed to draw 845 branch nominations, majority of the provinces supporting her, 7 provinces on her side. Then her closest rival is Zingiswa Losi, like Eldrin said earlier, probably the youngest candidate on this, on this list of the top 6. She only has the support of 3 provinces, very, very surprising. And then obviously there were two other candidates. One of them, also SABC board member, Phoebe Potgieter-Qubule. She declined the nomination before actually, coming to plenary. Then the last one, this one for me is a foregone conclusion. The current chairperson of Gauteng, Paul Mashatile, he's way ahead with 7 provinces giving him the endorsement. He is sitting with 1,581 branch nominations. Then we saw what happened earlier. Nomvula Monkanyane, she was nominated by 289 branches, but just by 1 province, and she declined. Then his rival is going to be Maite Nkwana Mashabane, 275 branch nominations, and with her it's just 4 provinces. So I think for me, looking at this list, 2 positions are already decided. The post of deputy president, my bet is on David Mabuza. That's if you look at the numbers that we have in front of us, and Paul Mashatile should prepare himself to manage the ANC's finances for the next 5 years.
I'll put number 3 on that and say that Senzo Mkhunu might be, as it stands at the moment, 1,479 nominations, probably one of the some of the highest. But the interesting thing though is looking at Paul Mashatile, 1,581 nominations. That is the highest out of all the nominees that are taking part in this contest to become leader of the ANC, or part of the leadership of the ANC. How has he been able to do this?
I think there's been a lot of wheeling and dealing. We obviously saw, in the run-up to this national conference, lots of chairpersons of the different provinces have been meeting, having their quiet meetings behind closed doors. The media was not privy to what was actually being discussed at those meetings. If I look at this list of the top 6, all this while people were talking about the so-called unity vote, and if I look at this list, I can see a fair balance of both factions, or both sides, both slates being accommodated. If you look at the presidential race, you look at the deputy president's post as well, David Mabuza is included. Then you look at the TG's post, Paul Mashatile, the DSG's post, Jesse Duarte. So I somehow think there's going to be a 50% balance of both, Cyril Ramaphosa and Dr. Dlamini Zuma's so-called factions or so-called slates. But I think the one disappointing thing for me is obviously the gender balance. If you look at this list, just 1 female who is likely to actually come out victorious in this race.
And that is Jesse Duarte.
Jesse Duarte, the DSG.
But I think also, just to put a little disclaimer on it, these are the branch nominations. And of course, those delegates go in there and they will do whatever they feel like doing. But it's quite a good indicator of where things may go, at least outlining one scenario. Lebohang, what do you make of it?
Yeah, there are no real surprises. I think the slate has been in composition for quite a long time. It probably reflects a lot of the horse trading, a lot of the bartering, and also an attempt to consolidate the balance of forces within the ANC at the moment, which is quite an undertaking. But what's more sort of fairly interesting is also that this generational lineage that we were talking about earlier is really absent here. I think for me it's disappointing, with all respect to the names here. It's disappointing to see Gwede Mantashe being recycled, Ace Mahashula being recycled, Senzo Mkhunu. I mean, and really, it's there's nothing fresh here, and it's like Jesse Duarte being recycled
in the same position.
Of the gender agenda.
That because as part of the intergenerational mix.
Absolutely, because what does this mean for that?
And how is this the party that's then claiming to be renewing itself, self-correcting? What is the definition of insanity? It's the same crew for another 5 years, which is extremely unfortunate. Not that there's anything. I think the perspective is one of the victims of longevity, of incumbency. It's difficult to remain as objective, as fresh, as dynamic as one would be if the same self-referring group of 6 or group of however many the NEC eventually will be composed of. It's just so difficult. And I think at a time like this, if there was a real commitment to renewal, we would be seeing a radically different list of names, age range, conscientious gender balance, etc. It's really more of the same. A pity.
what would you say to someone in the ANC who might make the argument that continuation has to feature when we elect new leadership? There should be some of those who are part of the leadership before, who are also part of the top officials.
Yeah, some, not all.
Yeah, where's the mix?
Where's the some?
There's no mix there. But I think in certain instances also, if you take Lingiswa Lozi, for example, I'm not surprised at that, because remember her and the COSATU debacle. So, you know, delegates coming here may be aware of that, and therefore when I saw the number of branches that actually nominated her, I wasn't surprised, because I thought she was a surprise on that slate to begin with.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And the fact that there were not that many people around her who also helped to build up, because, you know, as a candidate, you're not a monolith. You should have some kind of a critical mass around you, right? Who are also talking you up. There's been very little of that not in the way that we've seen for many of the other candidates. You know, and I think that's the other thing, that they shouldn't be lone rangers. These people should represent constituents. They should represent communities. They should represent positions, ideas, and that's not quite coming through either.
I wonder though, when you look at Jesse Duarte's position, I wonder whether the branches at all believe that there's no other fit person to take on that position as Deputy SG of the ANC. Because as it stands at the moment, she's probably the only person who's running for the same position from the previous top 6 officials, and she has the highest nominations for that position.
Exactly.
And I think with Jessie Duarte, you would recall at Mangung, she was uncontested. So there was no other candidates competing against her. And the fact that she's still highly likely going to be the Deputy Secretary General of the ANC for the next 5 years, I would have assumed that she had bigger ambitions, probably the SG's post, because, you know, serving as a deputy, the next step would be the SG's post, or perhaps the chairperson's post. So I'm very surprised that she actually accepted this nomination.
Perhaps she knows her limitations and how far up she can actually go. But more importantly, if you think about this in terms of proxy wars, does this mean then that you have the female candidates simply there, as proxies for male candidates and male interests?
You know, my problem with women candidates who are parachuted in, and I said this earlier, and I've been saying this for the duration of the conference, is that it doesn't do anything to build a culture from the ground up. These things, a culture of an organization which has a sincere and authentic commitment to women's empowerment, to some kind of a feminist, gendered organization in every real sense, has to be an organic, sincere, ground-up movement. You don't parachute. I'm very reluctant, in as much as it's fine to have symbols. Symbols are good. Symbolism is fine, but that doesn't fix and resolve the inherent deficits in terms of male-female power relations. None of this is going to address some of the abhorrent behavior and the culture of impunity we've seen regarding sexual harassment, terrible allegations within the ANC.
But none of that was addressed. You had 3 candidates who were running for the presidency, 3 female candidates, and none of them really addressed any of these issues. And
this has been the gap, even with the Women's League, that they have also they've also become a proxy for other issues. I think, over the last 10, 20 years, when was the last time that we even saw a shadow budget report from the Women's League where women should be in the budget, where women should be in Agenda 2030, where women should be, etc., etc. We don't see these sorts of reflections. I don't know, perhaps when you have another view.
Let me push it a bit, and let's speak about race reflections. Because when you look at the top 6, and that's the strange thing about the ANC, is that it is, we could have a debate about whether colored people are black or not. But here's the thing, the entire top 6 are black except for one position, which is the position of Deputy Secretary General, Jessie Duarte. And again, the person who was nominated to stand alongside Jessie Duarte, Phoebe Potgieter-Kubule. Again, the same thing. Is the ANC ever going to reach a point where it's truly reflective of what South Africa is, this rainbow nation that Mandela once spoke of? Will that ever happen?
I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. And I watched an interview with Jessie Duarte just the other day. She was speaking at the Lalu Chiba funeral, and I think it was you, Aldrin, or Mzwai or somebody. And Jessie, caught on to the idea that when she went to Limpopo and she only saw one, person of another race, within that crowd, and that concerned her, that worried her, because there is this assumption that the ANC is moving away from that, from being a non-racial party. The ANC was open to all races, decades back. So the fact that we are moving more towards that, instead of embracing that unity factor, the fact that the ANC is now becoming a black African party, I think we all should be concerned, and we also got to consider, two things. Firstly, the 2019 elections is around the corner. We all know that the minorities, such as whites, Indians, and so-called colored people, do not necessarily support the ANC. Like we saw in the organizational reports, Gwede Mantashe touched upon the subject numerous times, and he says we are losing the vote of the minorities, and we should be concerned. A manifestation of this was last year's local government elections, and in the SG's report, those numbers were reflected there, that we are losing support among these minorities. And if you look at the national events, you look at Human Rights Day, you look at all the other ones, June 16, the predominant faces you will see at those events are not minorities. Why? So the ANC needs to address, those issues. Then the other thing, around this entire leadership election, fine, we can focus on the top 6. But I think the other matter we need to watch very, very closely when these elections are decided, we need to watch who gets into that National Executive Committee. Okay, fine, this unity vote, maybe 50% of the so-called Cyril slate will get in, 50% of the Dr. Dlamini Zuma. But I think we need to watch that racial balance coming into that NEC, because remember, the NEC is that highest decision-making body between national conferences. So if we see changes within that NEC, of that 80-member NEC, so maybe the ANC will gradually make that change leading up to 2019.
But what evidence is there to support this? Because if you think about it, the so-called minorities within the ANC have raised this issue. They flagged it severally, and nothing has been done about it. I vividly remember in the run-up to the 2016 elections, a caller calling from the Sefako Mahato branch, calling in to a program that the SG Gwede Mantashe was on, and raising that very issue very pointedly, and was basically just shut down right there on air. So, the minorities within the ANC are speaking out, but even then, it doesn't seem as though they are finding, a willing ear.
And I think it also speaks to this whole unitarism that seems to have set in the ANC. We spoke about it earlier in relation to the tripartite alliance and the discomforts there, but I think the unitary approach in terms of a world vision, a perspective, and the ideological non-resolution of who should have the greatest voice within the ANC and who should shape the future of this country. And I think that the lack of consensus and the lack of really a coalescence around what you refer to as minority voices. I mean, what's a minority within South Africa?
Hence, I said a so-called minority voice
as well.
But the point that you made previously about the generational mix, and that argument that if everybody is of the same age group, then it raises other sort of issues and creates other problems. Doesn't the same then apply to the racial makeup of the party?
It's arguable. I mean, another argument could be that perhaps they're just reflecting on flat demographics. That this is the majority of people look and sound a particular way, and this is what has happened to rise. But I think the problem with that is that if there isn't intentionality, then you're going to get a particular trend. If you're not intentional about promoting, nurturing leadership, intergenerational leadership in the various ways that we have framed, you're going to keep on seeing basically the same faces and the same kind of discourse that arises from that, and the same kind of culture and behaviors that also we need a bit of disruption at this time.
Do you think that the ANC should take it down to policy level, like they did with with the gender mix, when it comes to the minorities?
I think they should, and very worrying for the ANC. Again, I will refer to the Secretary General's organizational reports we saw at the NGC in 2015 and then at the June Policy Conference this year. What surprised the ANC about the 2016 local government elections was they normally estimate the difference between their local government tallies and the national elections is around 4%. But what happened last year was that 4% was doubled. That difference between national elections and local elections actually doubled from 4% to 8%. So the ANC is very concerned. And the fact that most of the minorities did not vote for them, obviously it sounded alarm bells for them. So they need to bring that policy back into their documents. And, obviously we know National Conference is where those policies are discussed and they are rubber stamped. So those discussions need to happen here. Because remember, National Conference is not only about leadership elections. Here those policies need to be thrashed out. The branches need to make those decisions.
Well, indeed, it's the branches that need to make those decisions. And when we look at other political parties, quite precisely looking at the DA, the DA intentionally and deliberately made sure that they appoint a black spokesperson for the party, and the leader of the party is black as they try to attract the black votes. Sakina?
Yeah, absolutely. But of course, these are conversations that are not likely to find much, space and attraction here at this particular conference, as we've heard. But of course, we're going to have to leave it there for now.
Well, yes, we leave it there for now, but we'll continue with our coverage of the ANC's elective conference as the voting gets underway. Let's go straight to the studio in Auckland Park.
Well, thank you so much, Aldrin and Sakina. That was Aldrin Sampia, our anchors there at Nazareth, together with Sakina Kamwendo, who've been in the company of analyst, senior SABC researcher Ronesh Dawash, and Lebohang Pek, who've been on analytical overdrive. We really appreciate their insights. Now, we do understand that voting is about to start, or I think it started just a few seconds ago, and the delegates are now making their way into the voting hall. Now, here's what's going to happen now. Now, all the candidates for the top 6 will be on a single ballot after the nominations, and then the marshals will then call out the delegates to the voting hall, and they're expected to present their tags, their voting tags, and some form of identification, and then the delegates will be ticked off the register and then given a ballot form on which they will fill up, and then they'll be expected to make their mark next to the candidate of choice, and that they'll fold the ballot and placed onto the ballot box. Then we'll have the results first thing tomorrow morning, but we're not so sure of the exact time. But then most definitely, as we've heard, we'll get the results tomorrow and on who will succeed President Jacob Zuma. Well, do stay tuned to SABC News, Channel 404. We'll definitely give you more updates as that development unfolds. For now, though, let's take a look at this story. 4,770 delegates will start voting for the party's top 6 leadership, as I've mentioned, and the 54th elective conference currently underway at Nazareth. Now, the process will commence this evening shortly after a chaotic start amid questions over slate politics. Now, there were disagreements over whether delegates should vote for the top 6 first or include the rest of the 80 members. Meanwhile, the nomination process has been finalized, with the race for the party president being between Cyril Ramaphosa and Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. David Mabuza, Lindiwe Sisulu, Zweli Mkhize and Naledi Pandor were nominated for the position of deputy president of the party. Well, Pandor declined the nomination while Mkhize withdrew. As for the position of national chairperson, it's a horse race between Gwede Mantashe and Nathi Mthethwa. Ace Magashule and Senzo Mchunu are up against each other to replace Gwede Mantashe as the Secretary General of the ANC. And now the current Deputy Secretary General, Jessie Duarte, wants another term, and she's up against Zingiswa Lusi after the 2 others declined nomination. As for the party's Treasury General, Nomvula Mokonyana withdrew her candidature, leaving Paul Mashatile and Maite Nkwana Mashabane in the race for the person who will handle the ANC's finances. Well, the voting process will commence as soon as possible, as the new ballot sheets are ready this evening and all systems are in place.